In today's episode of Barnaby's podcast, Eye of the Beholder, we meet Carolina Tyr and Victoria Astudillo, gemologists, jewelry experts and founders of Jewelry Escape. Jewelry Escape. Are jewelry an escape?
It's an escape from the everyday boring life. It's a special little treasure world.
But jewelry, just like fashion, tells us a lot about who you are and perhaps even more so, who you want to be. Has it always been that way?
Yes, definitely.
Oh yes.
Always.
Since the beginning of probably mankind and civilization.
And think about all the kings and queens in history. They have worn jewelry to show the people who they are.
Their status and power and wealth. Definitely. Jewelry has always been a symbol for all of those.
And this is also going back to you find it also, don't you, in the natives in America?
Exactly.
But different kind of stones and gems, I guess.
Definitely. It's a way to show that you are, that you belong to a group of people, but that you also are, maybe have a special kind of power in this group of people. That you might be a priest or a wealthy man or anything like it. So jewelry definitely tells who you are, and the lack of jewelry also tells you who you are.
True. But jewelry often represents important events in people's lives. Many have to do with acts of love, such as engagement or wedding rings, and different gifts for anniversaries, for example. But it can also be about, for example, a coronation or an award for a long and faithful service. Can you tell the difference between the occasions based on the jewelry when you see them?
Sometimes, or often you can. As you say, jewelry, for example, for coronations and other kind of occasions, they're mostly more prominent and exclusive, like tiaras and big sets of jewelry, those kinds of jewelry. And for coronations, of course, crowns and scepters and orbs, stuff like that.
And when it's love gifts, it's more the shape of hearts and expensive stones?
Yeah, it can definitely have some kind of symbolism, the piece of jewelry, how it's, or what symbol it wears. An arrow or a heart, maybe a pearl or something. But I think most likely if you wear a ring on your left ring finger, it's probably an engagement ring or a wedding band of some kind, but it can also most definitely be a power ring or something that you have a great relationship with yourself. But most likely perhaps an engagement ring or similar.
When you say that you have a great relationship with yourself, is that a modern thing? Or do you see that in antiques as well?
It's quite a modern thing, I think, since women have become more independent and can rule over their own money and fortune.
Definitely.
The word provenance means the chain of previous owner to the item through the years, which is part of the history. How much of a jewel's value is in the historical context?
Well, first of all, jewelry is a bit different, I think, from other pieces of art or antiques. And the main reason is that jewelry has a value in its metal, in its stones. It's not a piece of paper or a piece of wood of some kind. It's actually a metal that's very valuable. It could be a gold or platinum or silver, and it has a value on a different kind of market, not only the market where it's a piece of art. So the jewelry itself has a very high value often, and the provenance is kind of a bonus to the value of the jewelry. There are, of course, some other examples, but most of the time.
But also a provenance, it's also very important that the provenance is documented and well known to be able to raise the value of the jewelry.
It can't be your grandmother. Sorry.
You don't ever see it.
It can't be just a tale in the family. It has to be like some kind of documentation or like that. For example, we have an example like when Marie Antoinette's jewelry was sold on Sotheby's a few years ago, her personal jewelry. Of course, it was really high-end jewelry. So even without the provenance, probably it would have sold very well.
Definitely the single pearl.
Exactly.
That's the one you're thinking about, Carolina.
Yeah, the record-holding pearl. But knowing for sure that it was Marie Antoinette's jewelry, not just a tale that it had been owned by Marie Antoinette, but this was like for centuries. It was like a very well documented list and everything about the jewelries, the pieces of jewelry. Of course, it raised the value because, I mean, who wouldn't want the pendant from Marie Antoinette?
The queen of all queens.
Of course, the old jewelry tells us also a story about the time they were made, about the people who wore them, as you mentioned, about the goldsmith's skills, of course, and their techniques throughout the ages. How has the development of the art and jewelry looked, broadly speaking, over the years?
It has been very affected by whatever happens in the world around.
About politics and wars and...
Definitely, a new technical industries or new findings of gemstones, new findings of new parts of the world, and then finding new gemstones, for example. So very much depending on whatever happens all around.
And that's so interesting. We think, since we're very interested in the history of jewelry, and that you can always follow, looking at the jewelry, you can follow what has happened in history.
Very clearly. Very, very clearly.
But can you mention some of those, how to say, groundbreaking moments or
occasions? Well, for example, when Christopher Columbus discovers the Americas, that is today America, they not only discover a brand new part of the world, but they also discover a lot of new gemstones, for example, emeralds. And they also find a new discovery of diamonds, which makes the diamond market during at least the beginning of the 1700s explode in Europe. So all of a sudden, diamond almost kills the trade of pearls and enters the world, the European world, as the main gemstone that all nobilities and royalties were just supposed to have.
And if you look at jewelry before the 1700s, you don't see that many diamonds or that many jewels with diamonds. But when you look at jewelry from the 1700s and forward, you see much more jewelry, much more diamonds in the jewelry. So you can really see the difference.
So that's groundbreaking. And very cool.
It was more artistic in one way previously. I mean,
well,
when
with
I say
the organic
artistic, more
pearls,
exactly,
yes, definitely.
Or if you see in the beginning of the 1900s, when they have discovered or found techniques to be able to work with platinum, the jewels, it's really a groundbreaking difference, because when you could start working with the platinum, you could do totally different kind of jewels than before, when you had to work with silver if you wanted a white metal for setting white diamonds. The silver is much more raw and clumsy or not as delicate as the platinum. But when you could start using platinum, the jewels could be much more delicate and much more...
which was absolutely as it was supposed to be, according to the the fashion of those days. The fabric was much more delicate, so then the jewelry also needed to be more delicate to not weigh it down. So,
but if you could choose a period,
I know which period Carolina loves.
Which one?
Well, actually, I have a few favorites, but if I'm going to tell a period that I would, with jewelry that I would like to wear myself, it would probably be like the 1920s, 1930s, the Art Deco period.
The period when they also use platinum.
Exactly. But I also love the Art Nouveau period, or Jugend, as we often say in Sweden, from the late 1800s to like approximately 1915, because it's really, really, it's really art.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree with you on both those
Yeah,
periods.
yeah.
And they're they're fundamentally different, right?
Yes, really,
Yeah.
really
Very
different.
much.
And the pearl is actually coming back quite a lot.
I think it
during
has
the
already.
Art Nouveau,
Oh yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
They use it again. Yeah.
Yes. And you, Victoria?
Yeah. What is yours?
Well, surprise! I love the 18th century jewelry.
Okay,
I think it's so special.
And you look fabulous in it.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. But I also do love La Belle Époque, or the Edwardian, and that's just right before the Art Deco era, and in between actually Art Nouveau and Art Deco. So and that's just the beginning of the platinum when they start using it, and I love the delicacy of the patterns and the pieces of jewelry. It's such a magical era of jewelry, and it's so short because it ended very abruptly with the First World War.
Yeah, true.
So it's just maybe perhaps a 10-year period, super short, and the jewelry that they made is just stunning, amazing, and it's so well preserved because of the platinum metal that they use, and it's so wearable. You can still wear it. I love it.
That's nice. But can it be simply stated that the technological development and the extraction of new deposits determine how the art of jewelry looks then?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, as we said, definitely.
I think it's interesting because this is the same when it comes to antiques, it's the same when it comes to cooking or winemaking, or it's those the
Architecture,
technique, actually.
whatever.
Yeah. And now we see it suddenly on the market, right? You have a website, for example, where you maybe trade diamonds, for example, as well. So that's also a technique, right?
It develops with whatever happens.
Yeah,
around.
both the market and the handcraft. So what would you say is the next trend then? I mean, if anyone really have...
Should know.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But
I think we have
all those
two periods that we think is going to be
that will actually come back because I mean, no trends are really new, are they?
No.
We do think that the Victorian era, that period of time, the pieces of jewelry made during that period of time, the handcrafted ones, will come back, and it's because it's been kind of underrated for many years. Gold hasn't been that popular, and the symbolism and all of that, but we do think that it's coming back, and it's probably also because we see a lot of it today at auctions, for example, and they don't really sell for that much. You can still purchase amazing and good quality jewelry, well, for a low amount of money.
It's
for nothing.
Considered what it is.
Yeah.
It is a bargain. So I think that will actually help. So,
But when you say that era, what kind of items is that? Is that tiaras or is that rings or brooches?
brooches, bracelets, rings, and earrings mainly. Tiaras, I would definitely want a tiara, but it's not wearable. And we have to remember that today's our clients, our young girls, they want to have or wear jewelry on everyday occasions.
Yeah.
And I also think when you see new jewelry designers, you can also see that they are actually inspired of the Victorian era, since, for example, rings with snakes, which are very common in the Victorian era. They
Stars.
have become stars, crescent moons, all those kind of jewelry. You see them in modern design jewelry today. So it's really, really, you see all the signs from the Victorian era.
From the past,
So
and as you say, no trends are new,
No
are they?
trends.
No.
But
Definitely not.
another era, I think, also will be the 50s. The 50s have been, I think, perhaps too near us, but now we have a lot. But we have some jewelry from the 50s for sale, and I think also our customers are really interested in those pieces, because they are also, I think, they are like very positive and happy in a way. With it's kind of a party jewels to me. I think they are.
I agree. And the 50s, they have so many fun new designs of the jewelry. A lot happens, and it's because they had to adapt to the Second World War, and they had to adapt with different cuts in gemstones, in diamonds, in sapphires or whatever. So the creativity in the design is so much fun.
And you can almost see like the hope of the future in the jewelry.
Yeah.
Well, when I think about the 50s, I think about a lot of kind of plain jewelries like silver and but you see something else. I guess.
Take a look at pictures of Grace Kelly.
Yeah. That's not plain silver.
No.
That's true. Yeah.
No, but that's also, I mean, since the 50s is our modern time, I think trends probably spread a lot easier and much faster than they used to, and new trends could spread much faster. So the party pieces that Carolina is talking about were definitely one of the trends, but then there was a parallel trend of the maybe more plain designed silver jewelry, as of Georg Jensen or Tobrun, and they were also made in an era where they had to think about also using materials that were accessible.
Exactly.
Like that you could use every day.
And that you could use. It didn't have to be the most expensive pieces, but it was the craving for jewelry is always there, no matter what happens in the world history. Even though it's wartime or happy times, you always have the craving for new pieces of jewelry, and you just adapt. Torun, she adapted with more plain silver pieces with gemstones that are not the most expensive ones, but they were for everybody.
Exactly, and she even used stones from the beaches in the south of
Yes.
France, right?
It's so much fun. It's super unique, every piece.
And those pieces cost quite a lot of money today, so they cost like it's diamonds. Actually,
Yeah,
almost.
exactly.
Definitely.
But they are also very special.
Yeah,
So
true, exactly. The design is very strong. Yeah. So, after all, there are some pieces of jewelry that always return in the history when you talk about famous pieces of jewelry. One of them is La Peregrina. Why is it so famous?
Well, it has such a long history. It spans, I think, almost 500 years or 500 plus years. It is said that it was first discovered in the 16th century by a slave in
Panama.
In Panama, and just because he found this huge white perfect pearl, he was released. But of course, they took the pearl, and the pearl went directly to Europe, to the Spanish royalties there.
And then it has been through history in different countries and different royal families. It's been in France, it's been in England. So it's been really, it's been around in the most prominent places.
And well documented.
And also well documented in portraits and stuff. So it's really been a famous piece all the time. And then of course Elizabeth Taylor made it even more famous.
Exactly, I was going to say that because you said the royal families, but even
Hollywood
Liz
royal.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Exactly. When was that?
It was bought by Richard Burton as a Valentine's Day gift to Elizabeth Taylor in 1969.
And he acquired it at an auction? Or
Yes, in an auction. I think he paid like $37,000 or something.
Which was a record price at that time of a natural pearl. And it's a really funny story about her little...
Yeah, because she shortly after she got it, she describes this, I think, in her memoirs. They were staying at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas and at their own suite. And then suddenly she noticed that it was gone. She lost it. And she was really devastated and didn't want to tell Richard that she lost the Valentine's gift, La Peregrina.
The most expensive pearl at that time.
At that time. And then I think she describes that she threw herself on the bed and screamed into the pillow because she was so frustrated. And then she saw that their little puppy was chewing on some bone. And then she thought, but we didn't give her a bone. And then she found La Peregrina in the mouth of the puppy, and it was without a scratch.
It was without scratch.
So it's
Otherwise, the
really
scratch is part of the provenance, right?
Yeah, if it would have. So she, along this super provenance from the 1500s and in the royal families of the whole of Europe, and then along with Elizabeth Taylor, the new royalty, like the Hollywood royalty.
And ended up in the mouth of her.
A dog.
It has
story.
survived.
And she wore, and the nice thing is that she wore it a lot. That you can see a lot of pictures with her wearing it. So she really.
But what about the price then? Because after Elizabeth Taylor died, it was an amazing auction when they sold an amazing collection of jewelries. And what about the price?
I think I checked it. I think it was something like $11 million. Let me check it once.
Because it was one of the most expensive
It was
jewelry
definitely.
at the time.
And the largest.
Yes,
also.
until just a few years ago.
Yeah. But it's also interesting. You were describing how it went from different royal families to her. And La Peregrina means the pilgrim. So I suspect that the pearl got its name because of its fate. That like so many other pieces of jewelry, it passed from one person to the next to the next. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that why?
I think that's why. Yeah.
I think so, definitely.
It's nice actually to think about that. That
Yeah.
you really, how to say, inherit something, and then it
And
goes
the
to the
jewelry
next
lives
generation.
on,
Yeah.
but we are the ones that...
And that's also what we usually say, according to also Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, that the jewelry piece lives on, and we are just the owners for a little bit.
We're
just
and the
guests
jewelry will
in
live forever. And I think that's true, definitely. And what I also like about La Peregrina and the other pearl jewelry is that it's an organic material. It comes...
And quite fragile.
It cannot withstand today's perfume, for example. You can definitely not spray your perfume or hairspray or anything on it. It can destroy the outer layer of the pearl substance, and there's nothing you can do once it has been destroyed. You can't polish it again or anything. So that La Peregrina has survived for so many years from a slave ship coming to Europe, been through all of these different kind of European royal families and ending up in the mouth of a puppy. It's amazing how it can survive and still be in such good condition as it is.
But where is it now? Do we know that?
It's a private collection, I believe, but we don't know who.
Okay. Hopefully that person knows about that thing with the perfume then.
Let's hope so.
It's not destroyed after 500 years. But when you look at old painted portraits, but also modern photographs, for example, you often see fantastic jewelry worn by the person on the painting or photos. Was it important to show off your jewelry in these portraits?
Yes.
Of course, of course.
They were central.
Yeah, so central, definitely.
It showed who you were,
Your
position.
preferably power or wealth. As we said earlier, jewelry defines you, who you are. The jewelry that you wear shows that you are wealthy, your power, but the lack of jewelry also shows that perhaps you do not have that power or you are not of a noble family. So it says so much about you.
You see, if you look at portraits of kings and queens, for example, in the 1700s or 1600s, almost always you can notice that they wear pearls, men and women.
Yes, that's also important. Men wear
Exactly,
jewelry.
but what about that? Because if today you don't see men wear the kind of jewelry that they had at that time.
No.
But what about if you get someone coming to you with some jewelry or pearls, could you say that this was owned by a man or worn by a man? Were they different? Or was it the same kind of jewelry?
I think the jewelry worn by men, for example, you could have like aigrettes in your hat.
Or buttons in your vest or shirt.
Exactly, buttons.
And then it's probably worn by a man, and most other pieces of jewelry are most likely worn by women. Even though pearls were the gemstone to wear for many hundreds of years, it's still, we can still see that a pearl necklace were probably not worn by a man. But there are also examples of King Charles II of England and his pearl earring. Even though he only wore one, it was still worn by a man. So,
and if there would have been two earrings, probably it would have been worn by a woman.
most likely.
But how important are those portraits for you then when you work?
Super important. Super important. Our work is a lot about being a detective. We try to identify the piece of jewelry that we have in front of us, and with the information that we can gather, then we can also put a value on it.
And date it.
And date it, yeah, of course. And the portrait helps us a lot. Defining the style, for example, of a piece of jewelry.
It's the first thing that I look at when I look at a portrait. I always take a look at the jewelry, and we're like two nerds, always going with our telephones to like take a picture and like to have for our documentation and reference. Exactly.
It's super interesting. Not only what pieces of jewelry that they wear, but also how they wear
Exactly.
it, where they place it in their hair or their body or their dress or whatever. It's super interesting. It helps us so much.
You, Carolina, mentioned Grace Kelly before, but name 3 royalty or celebrities who have been the key for the development of the art of jewelry.
Well, a favorite of ours is Benvenuto Cellini. He was a crazy Renaissance goldsmith, living, of course, in Florence, in Firenze, in the 1500s. And he was not only a goldsmith, he was also a sculptor, and he did enameling, and he cut some stones, and he did whatever.
Universal artist.
A Renaissance man, even at that time.
Da Vinci,
Yes, definitely. At least he saw himself as that. He has written an amazing book that you can still purchase today. It's called The Treatises of Benvenuto Cellini, and where he just states all of the different kinds of work of art that he can perform. As we said, he was a goldsmith, so he also tried to be an alchemist, even though he did not succeed. He was a sculptor. Some of his pieces are at the Louvre in Paris. You can see his sculpture there. He was a well, at that time, gemology as it is today did definitely not exist, but he had all the knowledge that you could have about the gemstones that were known at that time, when all blue stones were sapphires, for example, or all red stones were rubies. And we know today that that's not the case. Just that his book is amazing to read still today for us, for any goldsmith, for anyone in this business. It's very pleasurable to read.
It's so much fun.
And
He's not a humble man, you can say.
And no, that's not one of his. No, he's
But
definitely
is it because
not.
it describes the market and how he did things?
Yes, he describes how he performs his art, and very detailed in many occasions. But he also thinks
Like the enameling.
the best of himself. Yes, the enameling is that's such a good example. Enamel, as you know, is glass, glass with some pigments of colored pigment of some kind, and his best advice to make this pigment, to crush it so it becomes a pulver,
In powder.
powder, was to actually chew on it, and chew on it, but under the circumstance that you would have teeth. So, and then he says, as I have.
And also he's very precise in which stones are gemstones and which are not gemstones.
Yes.
And I think it was only diamonds, emeralds and rubies and sapphires. Those four were the gemstones.
Yes. So he still has...
He ruled the world.
Exactly, he ruled
He
the
has
world.
impacted jewelry today. As we said, the Rolex has a model called Cellini. So,
The Rolex watch.
Yes.
And the second one, of course, must be Queen Victoria, since
Of England.
Of
yes.
England, yes, because she set the jewelry style for like a whole century. Actually, it was her personal style, and as we have said many times, she started using jewelry for like everyday use in a new way. I think, even though, I mean,
And she loved jewelry.
she
Loved
loved
it so
jewelry.
much. Her beloved Prince Albert, he gave her a lot of jewelry for every occasion in life.
And also when he died, when she started wearing mourning jewelry, I mean, the whole world followed her.
True.
And the whole world followed her because then they could print magazines, and the magazines could spread with new technologies like boats and trains and everything. So her face on those magazines on the cover, it spread, and then the trend spread quite rapidly throughout Europe. So whatever she wore or didn't wear was the trend. She was a true influencer.
Because her style changed through the years.
Very
That
much.
was what she...
Yeah,
Exactly.
very
I mean,
much.
and we still today we call it the Victorian era. That
Definitely.
definitely.
Okay, that was number 2. Number 3?
Number 3.
I must say then I would say Wallis Simpson, because Wallis Simpson, who was married to Edward VIII, who had to abdicate from the throne to marry her, because she was like a very she hardly wore any antique jewelry, but she was almost like a like an influencer. She bought the latest style of 1930s, 1940s jewelry, and she was also buying from all the great jewelry houses like Van Cleef & Arpels. I mean, their first, they are famous for a special setting, invisible setting, where you have specially cut gemstones that are set in a way so you won't need very much metal. You can just like a puzzle, you just set the gemstones like really, really close to each other. And she was one of the first to wear and buy jewels with the invisible setting and somehow made it famous. And also she was doing very much jewelry together with Jean Toussaint from Cartier. They were working very closely with ideas and stuff like that. And she always wore very modern jewelry, and many of her items have been really become iconic, like the panther brooch from Cartier, the bib necklace from Cartier, like this Van Cleef & Arpels leaf brooch, and so I think she's really important for the jewelry in the 1930s, 1940s.
When you have an antique piece of jewelry in your hand, what do you look at to judge value and age?
That's the detective work.
That's the best part.
Exactly.
Well, we have to identify the piece that we have in our hand. We have to identify the metal, what it is made of. That gives us a lot of clues, approximately where in history we are to date the piece of jewelry. We also have a look at the gemstone.
And how they are cut.
Exactly, what gemstone it is, and then how it is cut. Because the cutting of the gemstones also have a separate timeline. And it can tell us a lot from approximately when this piece of jewelry was made.
And also, of course, how the jewelry fashion was at the time.
Yeah, the style of the jewelry. That helps us to set the date and presumably a value also of the piece. It's super, super fun and super interesting. I think it's one of the best parts with whatever we do.
It's lovely when we get a piece that we have to like work a bit with to
And sometimes there are hallmarks, of course, and the hallmarks helps us a lot. It tells us who and where and when, mostly.
And also putting all those things together also. You have the hallmarks, but you cannot be sure that it's right. You have to also see, is it comparable with what gemstones you used at that time? Perhaps a gemstone wasn't even discovered at that time, and is it cut in a way that is typical for that time? Those things.
You work with both antique jewelers and modern jewelers. But what is the biggest difference between antique jewelers and modern jewelers? Is it the quality or?
Well, yeah. First of all, there are not that many antique jewelry pieces out there because that time, of course, has passed. And a lot of jewelry has either disappeared somehow. Jewelry was also, every time something awful happened in the world, war or anything, the first thing you grabbed was probably your jewelry because it had a value. And it could have been broken up into pieces, sold, a stone there or gold there or whatever. So there are not many antique jewelry pieces out there today, and not all of them are well preserved because they have some age onto them.
But almost always in the antique jewelry you have the very nice craftsmanship, which you can also find in new jewelry if you're lucky. But the thing is, with the antique jewelry you get the craftsmanship, but you don't pay the amount,
the work hours.
You don't pay for the work hours. That's the thing.
True.
But modern jewelry today can also be mass produced. And then you have to be a bit more careful because then let's just say you get what you pay for. At both ends. Definitely. But we love modern jewelry as well. There are so many talented goldsmiths, stone setters, lapidaries today that make amazing pieces of jewelry. But I think you said it, quality is the key word to all of it.
It's whatever you do in this business, isn't it?
Definitely.
No matter if it's paintings or furniture. Sometimes great antiques jewelry with amazing provenance is sold And it happens that even royal jewelry is for sale for the public. Just as you mentioned, actually, the Marie Antoinette's extensive collection been sold at auction through the years. And you were at that auction, weren't you? Or at least, I mean, you tried the jewelries, didn't you?
Yes, we had the honor and pleasure to be not at the auction, but at the viewing. And we were able to sit down, was it for an hour or more?
Yeah.
With Daniela Maschetti, the chief,
the head of jewelry
department in Sotheby's Geneva, where the auction was. She was very generous with her time, and we could sit there and look at Marie Antoinette's jewelry.
Not only look at it
and try it.
Exactly.
You tried it on.
We tried it on, most definitely.
How was it?
We got chills all over our body.
We said that this is probably like the peak of our careers.
Yeah. No, it goes from down from here. No. I think my palms were sweating. Yeah, probably. My palms were sweating for a whole hour. It was
almost like you could feel her presence somehow.
The atmosphere of her was there. It was amazing. And it was not only amazing that it was her pieces. She was, as we said, the queen of all queens, and she was a big jewelry lover, but it was also her personal jewelry. It didn't belong to the state. It was hers. She had worn them, and also the story that they had discovered, or the provenance, of course, they knew exactly the evening when she collected her jewelry, and she put it in cotton and then in a little wooden box and sent it away. They knew exactly the date and the time, and they could follow it almost all over Europe.
And everything was very well documented.
Very well documented.
From her, or you mean at the auction?
From her, and then also, of course, at the auction, but from her. So you could be sure that it was just not a tale, that it was actually this jewelry, and it has been preserved then in the family, because she sent it to Austria, where her family was, and then her daughter, when she was freed and got to Austria to her relatives, she got the jewelry from her mother, and she wore it, and then it had been inherited in the family until those days.
But Marie Antoinette is considered to have been almost crazy about jewels.
Yes. I understand.
And I spent enormous sums on gems and jewelries, right? Do these kind of customers or clients still exist today? Do we find the same collectors?
Yeah, we do actually. We're not going to tell any names, but we do have a few of them actually as our clients, which we are very proud and very honored of. Actually, one of them, she does work with jewelry, but modern jewelry, but she chooses her personal collection to be antique jewelry. And she buys not the most expensive pieces every time, but she buys exclusive pieces. So it can be the best piece of a Berlin iron necklace, for example. Which is not a metal that's the most expensive one. It's not gold, but it's a good example of it, and she's the owner of that kind of piece.
And also the woman who bought this extraordinary pearl.
Yeah, Heidi Gosshorten. She bought Marie Antoinette's record-breaking pearl. It wasn't made clear right after the sale. It did take some time before she actually came. She was photographed with the pearl necklace and then the big pearl pendant on. And she actually passed away. She was quite an extraordinary woman. She did marry quite young, and she married a German. Well, he was. I think he was an art dealer, but he also had other companies. He had something similar to our Åhléns also. So they did make a lot of money, and they purchased a lot of art, and art of all categories. And she was a jewelry lover. So she did collect a lot of these pieces, and she bought this amazing pearl that once belonged to
It
Marie
was like
Antoinette.
the main piece of that auction,
Yeah.
and it made a world record.
I think it sold for 32 million francs.
So she was a true collector then.
She was a true collector, and she actually worked, and I love that.
Yeah.
There's also Alessandro Michele, who is the main designer for Gucci. He designs modern clothes. You know how Gucci are like crazy, so gorgeous. But he only purchases antique jewelry for himself. So that's the only thing he wears.
They find inspiration.
They do find inspiration. So there are some buyers of these pieces today.
What is the most valuable jewelry owned by current royalties, you would say?
Maybe the Cullinan diamonds of the
Probably.
British crown jewels, because they are still the largest diamonds and the most perfect ones in all categories. I can imagine.
I should be.
Let's say it.
Say it.
Now, Carolina, you comment every year on the jewelry at the Nobel Prize banquet on Swedish television. I guess it's one of those special occasions when you get to see a lot of famous jewelry at once, actually. Are there any guests or royalty who you think have particularly good taste when it comes to jewelry?
Actually, I comment on the jewelry of the Swedish royal family. So those are the jewels that I focus on. And
It's okay to focus on them.
and it's,
They are amazing.
It's enough.
and I really love them. And each year I bet with myself which ones, or we talk about it also,
We do.
Victoria and I, which ones they're going to choose. Then there are some that we hope that they're going to wear this year, and so. But I would say that they are always very well thought through, the combination of the jewels they're wearing, the tiaras, the necklaces, and the earrings, and also the dresses. So they have a very nice combination. I remember once when the Crown Princess, one of my favorites are actually when the Crown Princess wore, we have a steel tiara in the royal family from the beginning of the 1800s, which is very nice and very like Empire style. And then she also wore a dress which was cut, the body of the décolletage was also very much Empire style. And that was so spot on, I thought.
That's nice. But are there any pieces of jewelry that usually come back so regularly into?
Yes, there are. They have the collection, and
They have their favorites.
I think they also have their favorites, exactly. And some of the jewelry are more often worn by the princesses. For example, Crown Princess Victoria. She uses a fringe tiara, which is actually somehow just for her, or it's inherited from our Queen Victoria, and she wrote in the testament that this tiara should be worn by the Crown Princess of Sweden. So that's why Crown Princess Victoria usually wears it. And there are some jewels that I think also the Crown Princess has said in an interview that there are some pieces of jewelry that she will not wear because she thinks they are preserved for the Queen, to be worn by the Queen. So probably they have their favorites, but also some agreement that some of the jewels are worn by the Queen and some of the jewels are worn by the Crown Prince, and then other jewels worn by the rest of the princesses.
If you close your eyes and dream that someone, could be anyone, come through the door, who would it be and what jewelry would she or he be holding in their hands?
For us to purchase or for us to value or...
Could be both actually, but to value. What would you like to
we
see?
actually-
You go.
We actually had one of my favorite museums is the Hallwylska museet in Stockholm, and Wilhelmina von Hallwyl, she had a jewelry collection, or she has a jewelry collection there at the museum. There is not so many spectacular jewels there. If you talk about large gemstones and stuff like that. And when we have visited that collection, we've always said that, but all the jewelry that they must have had in the family, Wilhelmina von Hallwy's jewels with more like large diamonds and stuff, they must be somewhere in the family. Where can they be? And it happened actually that one day one necklace from her came to us for looking at. That was really nice, because then we said, wow.
I think we manifested out in the universe that it was supposed to come to us, so we could evaluate it.
It's really...
And that was a very high quality.
It was a high quality piece, and it was also...
And very different from the pieces at the museum, because her museum collection is a collection of pieces, well, what you were supposed to have from each era or style. But
and she was very modern as a person,
she was super modern.
And also modest, I think, in jewelry and in clothing.
So this piece of necklace that was brought in.
So to me, it wasn't actually because it was diamonds or stuff. It was just that, wow, it's something from her and from the history. So that was
and something that we had been discussing
exactly
for so
long
hours. Yeah, that was amazing.
It was written in the stars.
Definitely.